Just when the Western Roman Empire seemed on the verge of total destruction, a charismatic, brilliant, and brave leader rose up and pulled it back from the brink, keeping the barbarians at bay and preventing any further incursions into Roman territory, while also reclaiming some of the lost lands on every front. While he desired more reconquest, he had to give his armies time to recover, and so he temporarily kept defending the borders while building up his forces. Before the last events in Iberia happened, a lot of changes took place in the rest of Europe. The Visigothic kingdom was completely dismantled by the Eastern Empire, the Gepids, and a recently migrating people from northern Germania called the Rugians, who would go on to take Rome from the Saxons. After a very long and brutal war, the Alamans ended up losing the entirety of their territory west and east of the Rhine, leaving them with only a few scattered cities in Gaul and Iberia. The Huns had been a terror for all European nations since they appeared from the east, but now they're under the leadership of a ruthless and vicious but also brilliant leader called Attila. He emerged from beyond the Pannonian basin with a huge army and demanded tribute from every ruler in the region. The Rugian king refused, and Attila took what equaled the demanded tribute and more from sacking every city the Rugians controlled, and stopping short of taking Rome itself before the king agreed to the demands. Upon hearing of this, the Saxon king got scared and agreed to pay tribute. However, the Vandal king was defiant and told Attila he'd die before submitting to him. Attila moved north to give the king his death wish. The king gathered all he could muster and sent the army to face Attila's armies. He managed to defeat one of the armies, but not before two cities were torched by Attila's forces. The remaining armies faced off near Segusio. The Vandals put up a brave fight, but they were no match for Attila, who went on to torch Segusio, besiege Massilia, and capture it with the king himself, whom he crucified along with every member of his family as punishment for his defiance. After this terrifying show of force, no one, not even the Jutes, would dare cross the Hunnic warlord, who left with the spoils of his victory. Back in Iberia, the Roman emperor made the necessary preparations to continue his reconquest. He launched his attack from Cordoba at the Franks. He took Olesipo with no effort as the Franks were squabbling among themselves up north. He planned to keep going north, but a Saxon invasion forced him to move east to deal with it. He managed to defeat the Saxon army, which fled back to Tarraco to recover from its losses. This enabled the emperor to retake Sigobriga and subsequently advance on Tarraco. After a long and grueling siege and several sally-out attempts, the Romans were forced to retreat as the losses were too great, and the army was not large enough to storm the city with the army inside it. Meanwhile, east, the Ostrogoths had been completely dominating the North African kingdoms. They took two important cities from the Gautalians and fully conquered the Garamantians. They also took Neapolis from the Saxons when they were busy fighting the Romans, while the Rugians took Fiorentia. Up north across the Alps, a long and bloody war between Attila and a defiant Jute king left the Jute Empire with very little land to rule, as Attila torched the south and east parts of it during his offensive, which was a success in the end. In stark contrast to the Western Empire, the Eastern Empire remained mostly stable and intact, barring a few losses in Greece, and their front with the Sasanians also stayed the same despite the few wars they had. However, when the Persians with their many satrapies finally stabilized their eastern and northern fronts, they turned to the Eastern Empire, who was still busy with barbarians raiding Greece. They started by subjugating all Arab tribes that stood between the two empires. While their satrapies moved from the north, they sent all their armies into the Levant. These armies succeeded in conquering all of the region, after which part of them went into Egypt and the rest into Anatolia. The Egyptian campaign resulted in the conquest of most of Egypt, with the western parts falling to local tribes. The Romans counterattacked and pushed back the satrapies. Their army then moved south to drive back the Persians, in which they also succeeded. They advanced east in an attempt to restore the Levant, however this time the Persians crushed them in battle. Over the next few years, the Persians and their satrapies took over almost all of Anatolia. However, the Romans gathered a huge army and sent it to deal with the invasion. The ultimate result of the counteroffensive was a peace deal in which the Romans kept control of most of Anatolia but relinquished the rest of what they lost. The Persians would later lose parts of their empire to invasions and rebellions. Back in Iberia, the Romans and their enemies were all gearing up for war. The emperor gathered his army and marched once again to finish off the Saxons. The Saxon army was easily defeated and the way to Tarraco was wide open. However, just when the emperor was about to continue the march, news reached him that Attila had crossed the Pyrenees intent on invading the empire. The emperor changed his course and decided to meet him in battle as soon as possible before he could do any lasting damage to any province. The two armies met on an open field near Tarraco. The Romans had around 8,000 infantry and 2,000 heavy cavalry, and the Hunnic army numbered around 13,000. 6,000 Germanic infantry, and the rest was a combination of light and heavy cavalry and horse archers. The battle started with the Hunnic horse archers raining their arrows on the Roman army, inflicting minor damage on the Roman heavy armor before running out of arrows. Attila then charged his infantry, which the emperor countered with 3 legions, leaving the 4th behind, followed by a cavalry charge from both flanks, thinking his superior numbers are sufficient. However, the emperor himself joined the right flank, while the 4th legion did what he planned for it to do. Although outnumbered, the Roman heavy cavalry managed to hold its ground, and after a while, the Hunnic horse archers on the right were routed by the emperor and his bodyguards. This caused Attila to join his left flank to balance the scales. After some fighting, cracks began showing in Attila's infantry, and his right flank has not managed to push back the Romans either. Victory for the Romans seemed very possible at this point, but as fate would have it, Attila, with the help of his bodyguards, managed to kill the emperor in the heat of the battle. Demoralized by the loss of their leader and outnumbered by their enemies, the Roman right flank collapsed. Attila and his left flank swung around and hammered the Roman infantry from the back, and the ultimate result was the complete destruction of the Roman army, along with the death of the emperor and his best commander. This defeat crippled the empire, and with no leader and no field army, the provinces were left defenseless, barring some fortified cities with small garrisons. Following his victory, Attila continued his path of destruction towards Cordoba, burning Toledo on the way and ultimately sacking Cordoba itself. The spoils from Cordoba alone were enough for him to leave Iberia alone, but not before burning an Alemanni town on the way out as a show of force. Not long after, the barbarian kingdoms in Iberia saw their chance manifested in the mangled corpse of a dying empire. The Saxons and Alemanni both gathered armies to invade. The Saxon army was small due to recent losses, but the Alemanni one was dangerous, so the Magister Militum, who took over in Cordoba as leader of the empire, gathered whatever forces he can by stripping the cities of most of their garrison to stop the Alemannic menace in its tracks. While the Saxons besieged Carthago Nova, he took the army to face the Alamans. The battle ended with a horrible defeat for the Romans due to his lack of tactical experience. Following this defeat, the empire completely collapsed. Town after town and city after city all fell to the barbarian invaders, until finally Cordoba itself fell, and with it, the last chapter in the empire's story was finished. If you made it this far into the video, congrats! You won the ultimate reward of being told to like and subscribe with the bell turned on, and share and whatever else you can do to support me. Also, tell me if you think I should do a what happened after the empire fell story, or start a new one. And
that's about it. So yeah.